Hi Year 12, welcome to your occupation revision lesson. I would like us to start with this task, which is just a brainstorm task. So here are 5 categories that I think cover everything you've been taught to do with occupation. I'd like you to read those 5 categories, and I'd like you just to basically predict what you think you're going to see in this lesson. So what can you remember about each of these 5 things? And then think about what you think we're going to probably recap today. So which theories, what kind of terminology are you expecting to see? And then you're going to use these 5 headings, if you will, to organize your revision notes for today's lesson. So start off by pausing this video, take 10 minutes, jot down what you think would come under these 5 headings. Okay, so this lesson is going to work with 2 types of slides. The slides that have this blue strip across the top, so a blue title, this is going to have all the information that you need to revise. It should be everything that you've already seen before, and it'll also have short revision tasks. So I'll either be asking you to fill in some gaps, or I'll be asking you to apply the theory on that slide to a clip of Dinnerladies that we're going to watch in a moment. If the slide doesn't have a blue heading and it just has some blue font at the top, then that's giving you the answers. So I'm just wanting to give you a kind of warning about that so that you don't accidentally look at the answers before you've done it. What you should end up with at the end of today's lesson then is your own revision notes that have these 5 subheadings, and they should be taken from the slides with big blue boxes at the top. Then you should also have a detailed analysis of occupational language in Dinnerladies, and that's what I want you to send to your teacher. Okay, so you'll be doing that and checking it against my answers that don't have a big blue box at the top. So this is your first task. I want you to tell me how jargon is often formed. So fill in these 7 blanks, and then I want you to apply those to these 3 examples. So upskill, PP, and upselling. What process is going on to form that new jargon? Pause now for 5 minutes and have a go at this. Okay, so as I promised, this is the answer slide, so it doesn't have a big blue box across the top. Here are your 7 answers that you should have had, and here in this yellow box at the bottom right is what I hope you have applied to the 3 options. So this should be on your own revision note sheet under this first heading. So if you look at the top of this slide, I'm telling you which heading this should go under in your revision notes. Okay, so welcome to Dinnerladies. This is one of my favourite programmes that's ever been on the television, so I really hope that you love it. All you need to know about it is that it's set in a factory in Manchester and it's set in the canteen. In this clip that you're going to watch today, we've got the HR manager, Philippa, so she works in the office in human relations, and she is walking the Dinnerladies through a royal visit because they're having the Duke come to visit them today. This here is our manager, Tony, and he's trying to prepare them as well and keep them in line. And then, of course, we have all the Dinnerladies lined up here. And then this man here is Stan, who's the maintenance man. Somebody to look out for is Victoria Wood, who wrote it. She's Bren, she's deputy manager. I want you to watch from 3 minutes 47 to 6 minutes 47 when the 2 managers are leading them through the instructions. And then I want you to skip to the actual royal visit at 18 minutes 17, which ends just before about 20 minutes. So have a watch of those 2 little extracts and think really carefully about how you're going to apply the things that you've brainstormed under those 5 categories to this clip. Off you go. Okay, so back onto your revision notes. You're on subheading 2 now, so theories about the function of occupational language. There are 5 speech functions, which you could put in the acronym of TRIPE, which is lovely, isn't it? So jot down TRIPE in your notes. What are the functions of speech in occupational fields, but also just in speech generally? See if you can remember them. Okay, here is what you should have in your notes. Please make sure that you've got those correct. What I would like you to do now is map those onto Dinnerladies. So tell me on your analysis of Dinnerladies that you're going to send to your teacher today, so separate document please, where do you see those 5 speech functions in Dinnerladies? Pause now, don't have a look at the next slide, it's got the answers on, and then when you've written your answers, check them against mine. Off you go. Okay, here's what you could have had. You might have different answers that could equally be right. So transactional might be ordering your lunch. You have to say what you want, they have to give you it. Referential would be instructions from Philippa and Tony. It might also be when the Duke and Duchess ask what's in a shepherd's pie and Bren tells them. Interactional is social talk. So basically this is stuff that's not to do with work. So any talk of silver service or Tony Blair, for example. Phatic is small talk. I would argue that you can't actually see any examples of it in those 2 clips, but there's evidence that it's clearly happening all the time because Tony knows exactly what each member of staff would talk to the royals about. So he knows that Jean will talk about thrush at any available opportunity. That tells me there's a lot of small talk going on in this canteen. Finally, expressive, where you offer opinions. Bren says that she thinks that they should be allowed to speak to the royals. She's not the only one who says that, but because she's deputy manager, she's able to address Tony directly, and it kind of helps, doesn't it? And they get to kind of speak to the royals eventually. The royals, you'll notice, do offer far more opinions than the canteen staff. Yeah, they tell them what they think of the food in the canteen, they tell them what they think of the food on the plane. That's because they're of a higher status, and so there's just this implication that if you're of a higher status, your opinion is more valuable, even though they're not the experts. Okay, so jargon aids working relationships. So we're looking at this third heading in your notes now, back to your notes. We're looking at the effect that occupational has on working relationships. So we're really thinking about how does it build camaraderie and solidarity. I want you to read through this slide, which is about the miners case study that you did, but also about how codes are a bit kind of exclusionary. And I want you then to think about how you would apply the idea of jargon or codes to dinner ladies. So have a read of that, pause, and then add something to your dinner ladies notes. Okay, so basically I was thinking about the term dinner and how that is jargon in the canteen that Philippa doesn't know. So she gets corrected, doesn't she, from lunch to dinner. And this is quite similar to the miners calling their lunch bait. So when the women say that simultaneously, it absolutely shows that this is about bonding. We use this terminology all the time. You don't know it, you're excluded. So this idea that Philippa works in an office because she's a kind of superior up the working ladder, she's an HR manager, she isn't aware of that, okay, this dinner lady term. Faircloth might see this as recasting. But there's also this exclusion when they try and use the jargon of the royals. So when they try and say ma'am or your royal highness, it all goes a bit kind of peak-tongued, doesn't it? Because they're not using that every day. Similarly, the Duchess struggles with shepherd's pie. She has to ask, what's that? So presumably this is food, but also maybe a profession, a shepherd, which is just not very aware of as somebody who's very posh and powerful. So you should have notes like this in your dinner ladies write-up. Okay, back to your notes then. These next few slides are all about how insults and expletives can aid working relationships. So how you can form group bonds by basically being horrible to each other. So have a read through these next two slides, and then I would like you to apply these two slides to dinner ladies. What do you think these scholars would say of dinner ladies? So have a read, pause, add to your dinner ladies notes using these notes. Okay, so we saw lots of insults between the staff. So Jean getting accused of being a thrush thruster, people getting accused of being servant wenches, that kind of thing. But it does seem to be about group membership because Philippa doesn't get involved in it. So I would say that this disproves Cooper, Coates, and Keisling because this is about mixed sex interaction. Yeah, Tony's just as involved in this camaraderie as the women are. Dinner Ladies is upholding Hayes studies because the jocular abuse is actually about belonging, isn't it? And that's why the royals, when they try and joke, it just kind of falls flat because they're not part of that community. Holmes and Stubb might say that Tony's insults are part of that distinctive, sparkly, communicative style aimed at developing team morale. He's trying to kind of buoy them up before this big, important visit. And you would think that Hughes's study of British lower working class women would be particularly relevant here contextually because, you know, gender-wise, class-wise, these are similar women. But actually, they're not using many expletives at all. They're using lots of insults, but they're not doing lots of swearing. Because Hughes says that that kind of harsh language replicates the kind of harsh living conditions or the harsh lives of those working class women, maybe we can say that being a dinner lady isn't as harsh as it is for Hughes participants. Okay, so on to category 4 now in your own revision notes. We're thinking about how the hierarchical context of the workplace is reflected linguistically. So, can you remember what Swale says are the 6 features of a discourse community? Use these images to try and jog your memory. Pause this video, write down the 6 features of a discourse community. Okay, here are the 6 things. Check your answers. And now I want you to apply these to dinner ladies, please. So pause this here and make sure that you've got these 6 things in your dinner ladies notes with examples. Okay, in terms of the goal, we've got serving the royals, intercommunication, lots of face-to-face stuff here, but you could also talk about the fact that Philippa has obviously had a meeting with them and she's relaying that information from a clipboard. Stan's announcements, he has to say, well, there's a male entering the female washroom facilities. In terms of like feedback in line with the common goal, there are often suggestions for how to serve the food. In terms of genre, Stan's announcement is definitely a certain kind of genre, isn't it? Something that he's kind of learned and being kind of expected to say. We also have this idea of if you're talking to a royal, then you have to wait for them to address you, and you have to address them as Your Highness. Special Lexis we've already discussed, so things like dinner, shepherd's pie, ma'am. And then also this idea of ratios of experts to newbies. So I would say lots of the canteen staff are experts. Dolly in particular has silver service experience. And she's trying to kind of educate Twinkle, who's the newbie, the kind of young girl. Okay, pause now then and see if you can remember the GASTAP acronym. What does that stand for Drew and Heritage Theory of Institutional Talk? And here are your answers. What I would like you to do is fill in this table and tell me where you see that in Dinnerladies. Pause now, fill in the table. Okay, quite similar to Swales here, so I'm not going to go through this. The only thing that I kind of want to bring to your attention is this idea of allowable contributions in structure, the idea that you can only speak when you're spoken to because of the royals. Yeah, that's all I wanted to point out. Okay, more gap filling here. So still on your notes, number 4 heading still. Tell me about Faircloth and his unequal encounters. Remember, he said that every use of language is a use of power and every piece of discourse is a negotiation of power, but maybe he said that because he's a man. So jot down those 7 gaps in your revision notes, please. Okay, on the left in blue is what you should have in your gaps. I want you to think about how this links to the idea of like formulaic conversations. So the idea that you can standardize your language. So this idea of being constrained, for example, or recasting. Essentially, if you're being told what you can and can't say by your employer, then that is what's happening in this research as well, isn't it? So Faircloth and Leibniz, I think, really speak to one another. I want you to now think about where do you see these 7 features, or maybe this idea of standardized language in Dinnerladies? So pause and jot down some notes on your Dinnerladies notes. Where do you see Faircloth and Leibniz? Okay, so here's what I was thinking then. So there's a kind of power asymmetry with Tony and the Dinnerladies. He gives lots of orders and he makes decisions, but he is kind of part of that group, isn't he? The Dinnerladies break the rules of turn taking. So Jean talks over Philippa, even though she's the boss. Brenda speaks to the Duke first. She just kind of forgets herself. And maybe that shows that they're not used to being restricted. It's not a very formal situation that they normally work in. Philippa has more positional power, but Tony's got instrumental and influential power. He's able to kind of keep the Dinnerladies under control. This is probably because he works with them every day. He's built that camaraderie, but also dialectically, he speaks similarly, doesn't he? Whereas Philippa's a bit posh. Tony recasts Philippa's instructions, for example, to serve a normal dinner when they get off topic. He uses oppressive discourse strategies with direct orders, even tells Philippa no, whereas Philippa is more polite. She says, oh, I do think we have to stick to what the royals suggested. Tony places constraints on the less powerful Dinnerladies, telling them only speak when spoken to. Stan makes that formal announcement that Leland might say was a standardized example of language. It's quite formulaic. Okay, these next 4 slides are all about face at work. So answer these blue questions, please, as you make your way through. But I want you to pause this video now, and I want you to read through these 4 slides, and answer those questions for me. Sorry, 5 slides, I lied. Finally, you're ending on Jonathan Newton here. So applying these to Dinnerladies, here is the kind of thing that you should probably have. So negative face threatening acts, you could have lots of orders from Tony. Positive face threatening acts, we've got, the thruster comment. Examples of minimizing, we've got jokes, we've got Philippa recasting requested opinions. This is quite interesting, and I'm running out of time to kind of go through it with you, so I just want you to pause and make sure that you've got these links in your Dinnerladies notes. And the final task that I would like you to do is consider what gender theorists might say about Dinnerladies. So there's some reminders for you on this slide. I want you to pause this video, read this slide about gender, and think about how that tacks on to Dinnerladies. Okay, so here are my answers that I will let you go through in your own time. So I've got a grand total of 30 seconds left, but I just want to reiterate that everything that you've done under those 5 headings are for your own revision, and I want you to send a nice detailed analysis of the Dinnerladies clip to your teacher today so they can see how you're getting on. Well done.